Hi guys, it's Tom here from Pro Direct Running, and today I'm very excited to be bringing you a brand new tool on our website, the Shoe Finder. As runners, these days we are blessed with a wealth of options when it comes to building the perfect running shoe rotation, but sometimes too much choice can be overwhelming. And that's where the Shoe Finder tool comes in. Our intuitive to use tool is there to provide a series of questions and parameters to hopefully enable you to find your next perfect running shoe. So without further ado, join me as we take a closer look at the Shoe Finder tool and find out how to use it most effectively. First of all, just as a quick disclaimer, I should mention that a pair of running shoes should never be purchased in isolation to try and treat or fix a pre-existing injury or biomechanical issue. If you are currently laid up with an injury, then I definitely feel your pain, but sometimes your hard-earned money could be better spent on a physio to get to the root cause of the problem, and we'll always be here when you're back firing on all cylinders. So now that's out of the way, let's get into the key features of the Shoe Finder. Once you've selected your gender, the next thing that you're going to be greeted with is the option to choose what type of surface you'll be using your shoes for, whether that's road, trail, track, or cross country. I'm sure most of you watching this will kind of have a pretty good idea of what type of shoe that you are looking for, but if this is your first proper pair of running shoes, try and take into consideration the type of surface that you run on the most and what shoe you're likely to get the most use out of. The section where you're going to find the most amount of questions in different categories is definitely when it comes to road shoes. We've broken this down into three key sections, being everyday mileage, tempo days, and race day. So an everyday mileage shoe can simply be described as the shoe that you're probably going to be doing the bulk of your weekly mileage in. For most of us, that's going to be fairly slow, easy recovery miles, and for that purpose, you want a shoe which is going to be comfortable, durable, and obviously hold up over time. Next up, we've got the tempo run section. Now, if you've been running for a little while, you'll know that there's different terminologies thrown around all the time, but to keep it straightforward, we've defined tempo running as that comfortably hard pace where you're still pushing it, but you're not at your all-out max speed. The shoes that you'll find in this category are probably going to be pretty lightweight in construction, feature a fairly minimal upper, and a nice responsive midsole foam. However, it's probably important to mention that these shoes may not prove to be quite as durable as the everyday mileage options, as they are slightly more catered towards speed. Finally, last but not least, let's talk about your race day footwear. In recent years, the race day shoe market has exploded, with every brand coming out with their own interpretation of usually a pretty high stack carbon plated racing shoe. Obviously, these shoes are designed to be as lightweight as possible to enable you to reach your top speed on race day. And as a result, they're probably going to feature some kind of plate in this day and age in order to just give you that extra bit of propulsion as you're running down the roads. Similar to the tempo day shoes, these race day offerings aren't going to be the most durable in the world, so it's probably best to reserve them to your key sessions in a build up to a goal race and obviously the race itself. If you're looking for an everyday mileage shoe, the next thing that you're going to be asked to select is the level of stability that you're looking for. I'm sure many of us have probably heard terms like overpronation and supination thrown around in the running scene, but what do they really mean? So ultimately, in its simplest terms, pronation refers to the natural movement of the foot and ankle. Now, the vast majority of us when we're running will typically land towards the outside of the heel or midfoot or forefoot, and then gradually roll inwards and toe off on the big toe where the foot is the most stable. As a result, most modern day running shoes will have some kind of angle around the heel there just to aid with this smooth process. Where this can become a problem is if that movement becomes too significant, and that can be best described as overpronation. In that case, runners may opt for a stability shoe like the one that I have here, the Saucony Guide 14. And with a shoe like this, the density of the foam will usually be the same around the exterior of the shoe, but then feature a slightly firmer density material or medial post on the inside of the shoe. And this is effectively to limit the amount that the shoe is able to tip over and therefore keep you more stable throughout your gait cycle. So a pretty easy way to tell whether you might be overpronating is to take a look at a historical pair of your own running shoes. One thing you may notice is when the shoe is laying flat, if you're overpronating, you may see some significant bulging around this section of the shoe, as well as some excessive wear on the outsole of the shoe. Also, if you flip the shoe over and take a look at the outsole, you may see more significant wear towards the big toe area of the shoe, which again is just going to indicate that once your foot's landing and going through that stride, it's just rolling in a little bit more over to that side. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have supination. Supination is essentially where someone will still land towards the outside or lateral edge of the foot, but rather than rolling inwards and engaging that big toe joint, are more likely to stay in this fixed position throughout their stride. Likewise, people who supinate are definitely going to see a correlation with this and the wear that they're seeing on their shoes. So I personally tend to land towards my midfoot to forefoot area when I'm running, and I kind of err on the side of that supination. So for me, I see most significant wear towards this lateral edge of the forefoot. As is the case with any other sport, there are plenty of different ways to improve your overall running form and economy. However, runners who do tend to supinate are probably going to be best off with a straight neutral shoe, as a shoe with additional stability may only exacerbate this problem. Finally, the category that probably needs the least amount of explanation is neutral shoes. Again, from assessing wear on a previous pair of running shoes, you'll probably notice that that pattern is quite symmetrical from one shoe to the other. However, definitely bear in mind that the wear that you're seeing on your shoes will change depending on whether you are a heel striker, a forefoot striker, or a midfoot striker. Before moving on, it's important to note that shoes in the tempo day and race day section will very rarely feature any dedicated support, which is why it is missed out when selecting shoes in these categories. As a result, these types of shoes may prove to be slightly unstable for some runners. However, these are designed for specific purposes and aren't really meant to be your daily trainer, so using them once or twice a week shouldn't cause any problems. So if you are a runner who requires stability, don't be deterred by this. Next up, let's talk a little bit about cushioning. On the shoe finder, when choosing between an everyday mileage, tempo day or race day shoe, you'll be provided with two different options, and those are regular cushioning or extra cushioning. Fairly self-explanatory, but for those runners who prefer a slightly more connected, closer to the ground type ride, are probably going to want to opt for a more regular cushioned shoe, whereas those runners who prefer a nice soft feeling underfoot to help protect the legs are probably going to prefer a shoe in the extra cushioned category. Just in the purpose of providing a visual guide, for the regular cushioned shoe, right here I've got the New Balance 880 V11, which you can see has still got a nice amount of cushioning underfoot, but is fairly minimal when compared to a more maximalist cushioned shoe like the Nike Invincible Run. Generally speaking, this same principle applies when talking about tempo or race day shoes, and actually having a slightly higher stack like we have on the Endorphin Speed 2 enables brands to implement some kind of plate like the nylon plate that we have sandwiched in the midsole of this particular offering. However, for those more old school runners out there who are looking for a traditional racing flat experience, there are still some solid options out there, so don't fear. Bringing our attention to trail running, the key differences here will be in traction and the materials used in the upper of the shoe. As you can see with the very popular Hoka Speedgoat 4, in comparison to a typical road running shoe, which will generally just feature a mesh upper, on the Speedgoat, we have strategically reinforced areas where you're likely to maybe be kicking stones and tree roots and things of that nature. But the key difference is definitely when we flip the shoe over, and as we look at the Speedgoat, you can see we have a vibrant outsole with significantly more traction and deeper lug depth in comparison to road shoes. Similar to what we mentioned with tempo and race day shoes, trail shoes will rarely feature dedicated stability characteristics, purely due to the fact that the trails you're running on are likely to be uneven, and therefore you want the foot to be able to move naturally. Moving on to something completely different, putting a trail shoe back and taking a look at spikes. These are going to be the pinnacle of fast running. Incredibly minimal in construction, spikes are designed to have just enough protection to save the legs, whilst obviously having dedicated places to put your spikes in for superior traction on the track or on the cross country. On the spike section of the shoe finder, you'll find three categories, being sprint distance, which covers anything from 60 meters up to 400 meters, middle distance, which will cover 800 meters to 3000 meters, and long distance, which will cover 5000 and 10,000 meters. Really, the key differences here are that the shoes designed for the longer distances, like the incredibly popular Dragonfly that I've got here, will just feature a little bit more in the way of cushioning, just to give that extra bit of pop as you're doing the laps. A cross-country spike will be slightly different in construction, but the main thing to bear in mind is that running on pretty treacherous conditions, as we do most of the time here in the UK, you're probably just going to be wanting to use some slightly longer spikes to ensure that you've got reliable traction. And that's pretty much it. Once you get to this stage of the shoe finder, you'll be instructed to input your chosen price range and shoe size, and then you'll get a list full of results that are perfect to fit the job that you're after. In keeping with our next level sport mantra, the Shoe Finder tool is there to provide you with a next level online experience and help us to help you find your next perfect running shoe. So the choice is yours. Head over to prodirectrunning.com and check out the Shoe Finder tool for yourself.